Often alone, at the first light of dawn, I have had to speak my sorrows. There is no one alive to whom I would dare open my heart fully. The tired mind cannot fight fate. The troubled heart finds no comfort. Anyone who knows how cruel sorrow can be when you have few people who care for you will understand this. The path of exile takes hold of him, not golden treasure, a frozen spirit, not the comfort of the earth. He remembers the great halls and the gifts given there, how in his youth his Lord welcomed him to feasts, and that joy is now all gone. When sorrow and sleep both wrap themselves around the poor exile, it feels in his mind as if he is holding and kissing his Lord, laying his hands and head on his knee, just as he once did in better days. But when the friendless man wakes again and sees the cold grey waves before him, seabirds bathing, frost falling, and snow mixed with hail, the wounds in his heart grow heavier. Pain comes after pleasure. Where have the horses gone? Where are the riders? Where is the one who gave gold? Where are the seats of the feast? Where are the joys of the hall? How the time slipped away into the dark, as if it had never existed. In the Old English poem The Wanderer, written by an unknown author in the late 10th century, an exiled warrior mourns the death of his lord and companions. He drifts alone across cold seas, sad in winter, longing for the hall, grieving the destruction of his people and the happy days of his youth, days spent in the mead hall, a place of warmth, community, and belonging. The hall that once rang with laughter is now silent. It is more than just a building. It stands for the center of meaning, now left empty. The wanderer walks the path of exile, a man of sorrows, cut off from his homeland and his people. He reflects that no one can escape fate, which comes for everyone. The wanderer is deeply alone, both outwardly and inside himself. His mind dwells on better times and on how nothing in this world lasts. But he carries his pain quietly, and despite his sadness, he speaks of the importance of wisdom and patience, of holding on even in the face of loss. In the end, he concludes that true stability is not found in this passing world, but in God. Everything fades, but God does not change. Wandering as a basic pattern of human behavior goes back to our oldest ancestors. But when survival is secured enough for the mind to turn inward, the wanderer archetype is awakened, bringing something more existential and psychological than just staying alive. Archetypes do not disappear. Their form stays the same, but their content may shift, shaped by new conscious experiences. We evolved within small, close-knit groups where each person played a vital role in finding food and staying safe. Days were spent wandering, foraging, and hunting. Nights were spent around the fire. The fire was not just for warmth, cooking, and protection. It was the gathering place for social and cultural life, the center of meaning. Around it, our ancestors shared food, planned for the next day, and exchanged stories, dreams, and spiritual beliefs under the wide night sky, where the Milky Way shone brightly, untouched by artificial light. Human genetics have not kept pace with the rapid changes of the modern era. Our biology is still basically aligned with the simpler, steadier rhythms of hunter-gatherer life. Despite its hardships, that life carried a deep sense of belonging. As social beings, we are wired to belong to communities where our contributions are seen and valued. When that is lost, many fall into meaninglessness. Anthropologists have long known that when a people lose their feeling that their way of life is worthwhile, they may stop reproducing or, in large numbers, simply lie down and die beside streams full of fish. Food is not the primary nourishment of man. The word wanderer comes from the Old English wandrian, meaning to move about aimlessly. Such a person drifts through life without a fixed home or direction, restless in the search for purpose and belonging, often feeling the urge to pack a bag and simply leave to an unknown destination. In Japan, a samurai became a ronin, a wanderer, upon the death of his master. A samurai was expected to take his own life after such a loss, for his identity was tied to loyalty to a lord. Those who did not follow this tradition were dishonored and pushed to the edges of society. The ronin drifted from place to place. Some became mercenaries or rebels, while others managed to find a new master. In modern Japan, ronin is also used to describe students who have failed university entrance exams or people without work, reflecting the pressure and expectations around academic and professional success. The word wanderlust, rooted in German Romanticism, carries a light-hearted desire to wander. In modern German, however, the word Fernweh, meaning far sickness, has become more common. It carries a melancholic tone, a deep longing for distant places, and the hope of one day finding somewhere on earth where you truly feel at home. Such people feel nostalgia for the good old days, or the warmth of childhood, and sometimes experience an uncanny sense of déjà vu, as though certain moments have been lived before, or new places already seen. The wanderer longs for home, yet feels at home nowhere. living in a space between past and present, the familiar and the unknown. He is in this world, but not of this world, echoing what Lovecraft wrote. I know always that I am an outsider, a stranger in this century and among those who are still men. In scripture, the archetype of the wanderer is reflected in Cain, who, jealous of God's favor toward Abel, commits the first murder and is cursed to be a restless wanderer, exiled to the land of Nod, whose name in Hebrew means to wander. In the 13th century, the legend of the eternally wandering Jew arose. As Christ carried the cross, a man mocked him, telling him to hurry. The unrecognized Savior turned and said, "I go, but you shall be waiting here for me when I return." If there is one defining characteristic of the wanderer, it is restlessness. A constant need to chase the next thing, whether in the outer world, new places, careers, or relationships, or in the inner world, memories, dreams, and reflections. One grows tired of living in the country and moves to the city. One grows tired of one's homeland and moves abroad. One tires of Europe and goes to America, and so on, finally dreaming of endless travel from star to star. Or the movement is different but still always outward. One tires of dining off porcelain, then silver, then gold. One burns half of Rome to get a sense of the fire at Troy. This method defeats itself. It is the bad infinite, an endless progression. Once something is achieved, the wanderer is no longer satisfied and seeks something else, on and on. This insatiable desire is the cause of much of our suffering. One could say that the wanderer cannot commit to anything, but he is certainly committed to wandering. He is always in search of something, but once he finds it, he quickly sets it aside and keeps searching. The outer wanderer is caught in a paradox. When he stops moving, he feels imprisoned. When he moves, he feels briefly free. He is condemned to wander for the sake of wandering, yet unable to rest without feeling trapped. This may lead him to accept a kind of romantic fatalism, accepting his seemingly unavoidable condition. We also wander within our own minds, conjuring imagined scenarios to escape reality, or getting caught in rumination, locked in a loop of negative emotions, past regrets, and perceived failures. In this way, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The inner wanderer may daydream, watching an endless stream of fantasies unfold like a film, while ignoring the emotions hidden within these inner images, emerging exhausted, drained, and unfulfilled. This is passive fantasy. The unconscious figures remain locked up, crying out for freedom, and one is unable to nourish the part of oneself that is starving. As Carl Jung said, we have been so busy with the question of what we think that we entirely forgot to ask what the unconscious psyche thinks about us. In contrast to passive fantasy, active imagination allows the I to fully enter the unconscious, experiencing it with the same intensity and presence as a physical situation. Here, the ego does not impose its own meaning, but instead surrenders to forces beyond its control, serving as a bridge between the outer and inner worlds. Similarly, in meditation, one observes emotions without judgment, acknowledges them, and allows them to be absorbed into consciousness. In this way, our inner figures are nourished and brought to life, like a skilled sculptor who sees the form hidden within a block of marble and carefully chips away what is unnecessary, freeing the figure from its prison. For Kierkegaard, the unreflective pleasure seeker sees boredom as his worst enemy, the root of all evil. Strangely, those who do not bore themselves usually bore others, while those who do bore themselves often entertain others. People who are incapable of boredom are typically those who are very busy in the world. But that is precisely why they are the most boring and the most insufferable of all. To wander without end is eventually to arrive at a dead end. A 2014 study called Just Think, The Challenges of the Disengaged Mind found that people would rather give themselves electric shocks than spend 6 to 15 minutes alone in a room with nothing to do but think. As Milton writes, the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell a hell of heaven. And as Pascal famously stated, man's unhappiness comes from one single thing, not knowing how to stay quietly in a room. We often convince ourselves that boredom is bad, but the opposite is true. You need to be bored. When we are not focused on external tasks and are left alone with our thoughts, the brain's default mode network lights up and our minds begin to wander. We reflect on ourselves and on life and begin to feel uneasy. But if we distract ourselves every time we feel slightly bored, we make it harder to find meaning and we block our own creativity. Modern life is driven by a relentless cycle of work and financial pressure, often sedentary and confined to a desk. In the few breaks we get, we instinctively reach for online content, numbing ourselves with short-term pleasures at the cost of long-term fulfillment. Too many drift into mediocrity, lost in distractions and shallow entertainment until years pass and one realizes that nothing meaningful has been built. Despite constant connection through technology and social media, loneliness has increased. Shallow interactions and the lack of genuine belonging leave many feeling isolated. We compare ourselves to the highlights of other people's lives, mistake them for the whole truth, and grow more alienated. We create unrealistic expectations for our ideal self while despising our real self. To fill this inner void, some become digital wanderers, creating online personas and seeking attention. In real life, they may go unnoticed, but online, they can appear as heroes until they return to daily life and reality feels dull by comparison. Others become anonymous internet trolls, posting deliberately offensive or provocative messages to get strong emotional reactions. Like Dostoevsky's underground man, they are alienated, resentful, and rebellious, trying to assert control or influence in a world they feel powerless in. Silence and stillness make us uneasy, so we reach for more noise, more stimulation. We feel a constant need to kill time, treating it as an enemy in our pursuit of progress. But this only brings more suffering, more stress, shorter attention spans, poor sleep, and heightened anxiety and depression. Many endure painful states of mind by distracting themselves, even if it means living in misery most of the time. When one steps back and looks at life, it almost seems like a grand tragic joke. Always running, running, running. What are you running for? Or better yet, what are you running from? Is it not perhaps yourself? Until one honestly confronts oneself, life, as Schopenhauer writes, swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. Ennui is a deeper, more existential form of boredom, a profound dissatisfaction and weariness with life. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are 6 realms into which consciousness can enter during the bardo, the in-between state between death and rebirth. These realms are part of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and reflect the mental patterns and attachments we carry through life. The wanderer's insatiable desire can be compared to the realm of hungry ghosts, where one experiences both poverty and fullness at the same time. Whatever you want, you already seem to have, yet this makes you more deprived, because satisfaction comes not from possessing alone, but from searching. There is a fundamental, insatiable hunger based on the realization that you already have everything you desire, yet cannot enjoy it. Once you hold what you wanted, the joy of having it fades, yet you cannot bring yourself to let it go. It is as though you are completely full but you love to eat, and so you begin to imagine the flavor of food, the pleasure of eating, tasting, chewing, swallowing. The whole process seems luxurious, and you feel deeply envious of others who can truly be hungry and eat. This is symbolized by the image of a person with a gigantic belly and an extremely thin neck and tiny mouth. In Dante's Inferno, after passing the gate of hell, which bears the inscription, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter," one first encounters the vestibule of hell. Here dwell the neutrals or opportunists, lukewarm souls who took no sides in life, neither good nor evil, concerned only with themselves. Guilty of moral indecision, they endure a punishment that mirrors their wasted lives, endlessly pursuing a shifting banner, a restless futility that reflects their spiritual stagnation. By contrast, limbo, the first circle of hell, is home to the virtuous but unredeemed. These souls endure no physical pain, yet wander without hope, in permanent longing, eternally separated from God. Colloquially, we say we are in limbo when we are unsure what to do next, caught in a state that is neither here nor there. Perhaps you have finished a project, but the next step is unclear, or you have lost your job and the future feels uncertain, or you have ended a relationship and do not know what comes next. It is as if life has paused and you are waiting for something to happen, but it hasn't yet. One experiences both stagnation and anxiety about what the future might bring. The wanderer's quest begins with a deep inner longing, driven by existential anxiety and the desire to make sense of one's life, as if something eternally firm is missing from within. Often we do not even have a name for what is missing, but we long for that mysterious something. Fate leads the willing and drags along the reluctant. Each must fulfill the purpose for which they were born, and that purpose is unique to each individual. What seems meaningless to one may be deeply meaningful to another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Perhaps one longs to discover one's meaning but cannot, even after years or decades of wandering. The pain may become so great that one convinces oneself that life is meaningless simply to escape the struggle. But the inner longing does not disappear. Eventually, the wanderer faces an existential crisis and begins to question the meaning of life entirely. Where am I? What is this thing called the world? Who is it that has lured me into the world? Who am I? How came I here? Why was I not consulted? Why not made acquainted with its manners and customs instead of throwing me into the ranks? How did I obtain an interest in this big enterprise they call reality? Why should I have an interest in it? Is it not a voluntary concern? And if I am to be compelled to take part in it, where is the director? I should like to make a remark to him. Is there no director? Whither shall I turn with my complaint? Even when outward appearances suggest all is well, inwardly one may feel lifeless. This emptiness drains the world of colour, making it seem desolate and barren. As within, so without, the external dullness mirrors one's inner life. How can one perceive the beauty of the world if one is dead inside? In such a state, deserted places feel more like home, reflecting one's inner landscape. Lord Byron writes, "There is a pleasure in the pathless woods. There is a rapture on the lonely shore. There is society where none intrudes, by the deep sea and music in its roar. I love not man the less, but nature more." Outwardly nothing changes. The trees, birds, and landscapes remain the same, but one cannot take pleasure in them. This inability to enjoy life, known as anhedonia, is often accompanied by depersonalization, a sense of detachment from oneself and reality. In extreme cases, this can resemble Cotard's syndrome, a rare condition in which a person believes he is already dead or does not exist. We cannot hope to heal the desolation around us if we do not first confront the desolation within. We worry endlessly about the state of the world, yet neglect to put our own inner lives in order. Not the Black Death this time. The Grey Life. While the Black Death was a sudden and catastrophic plague that caused death, the Grey Life points to a modern affliction that brings inner death. A pervasive dullness, a lifeless and meaningless existence marked by spiritual emptiness. Jung writes, "I went into the inner death and saw that outer dying is better than inner death, and I decided to die outside and to live within. For that reason I turned away and sought the place of the inner life." Inner death is reflected in the archetype of the zombie, which can be seen as a modern version of the restless wanderer archetype. When we use the word zombie casually, we usually refer to someone who is mindless, exhausted, or going through motions without thinking, as if sleepwalking through life. The zombie is dull, lifeless, and decaying, reflecting the emptiness within. In the book Zombies in Western Culture, John Vervaeke and colleagues explore how zombieism has become symbolic of the 21st century mood. The zombie has become an enduring symbol of the crisis in meaning. We are the walking dead. Zombies are a distorted reflection of modern humanity, representing the collapse of what is meaningful to us. They do not speak. They have nothing to say, showing their empty-headedness. They move in groups, yet remain utterly alone, without any sense of belonging. They have no home and wander absently from place to place. Zombies have an insatiable appetite. They eat brains, the seat of understanding, but no matter how many they devour, they remain brain-dead, showing how one can take in knowledge without true understanding. Their endless hunger represents the existential state of being unable to make sense of the world. Zombies are not evil but driven by instinct. They act without thought, giving no care to their own survival. In their pursuit of consumption, they will ultimately destroy themselves. If you come into close contact with a zombie, infection follows, and you become part of the horde, symbolizing the contagion of mindlessness. Tolkien wrote, "Not all those who wander are lost. You became lost in order to find yourself." The wanderer walks the path of exile, isolated from others. He is a lone wolf because he feels lonelier being with other people than with himself. Social interaction does not equal belonging. I stood among them, but not of them, in a shroud of thoughts which were not their thoughts. The wanderer may feel terribly lonely, lacking social acceptance or the temporary comfort of being liked by others. However, this acceptance often comes at the cost of one's individuality. It is through developing the inner self that one can face loneliness constructively. Jung writes, "If a man knows more than others, he becomes lonely." But loneliness is not necessarily against companionship, for no one is more sensitive to companionship than the lonely man, and companionship thrives only when each individual remembers his individuality and does not identify himself with others. The wanderer must compensate for his one-sidedness by learning to remain still, to sit in silence, and to observe his thoughts. He must turn towards his neglected emotions and dreams and write them down or paint them, making the invisible tangible. Through this practice, unconscious contents become conscious, allowing the neglected parts of oneself to become integrated. In this way, one gives birth to the true self, moving from fragmentation to wholeness. By first connecting with oneself, one can build meaningful relationships with others. One must not try to escape from loneliness, but instead accept it as part of oneself. Krishnamurti writes, "We will do anything to escape from loneliness, to cover it up. You may lose yourself in a crowd and yet be utterly lonely. You may be intensely active, but loneliness silently creeps upon you. Put the book down and it is there. Amusements and drinks cannot drown loneliness. When the laughter and the effects of alcohol are over, the fear of loneliness returns. The entity who tries to fill or run away from emptiness is not different from that which he is avoiding. He is it. He cannot run away from himself. All that he can do is to understand himself. He is his loneliness, his emptiness. As long as he regards it as something separate from himself, he will be in illusion and endless conflict. When he directly experiences that he is his own loneliness, then only can there be freedom from fear. The young prince Siddhartha Gautama was sheltered by his father from all knowledge of suffering, for a prophecy had foretold he would become either a great king or a Buddha. Surrounded by luxury and entertainment, he lived a life of pleasure until the age of 29, when he ventured outside the palace. There he encountered an old man, a sick person, a corpse, and finally a monk devoted to understanding suffering. Deeply troubled by what he witnessed, and inspired by the monk's example, Siddhartha gave up his princely life to seek a path that might end human suffering. After years of meditation and self-discipline, he attained enlightenment and became the Buddha, the awakened one. He taught the first noble truth, that life is dukkha arising from insatiable desire and attachment. While often translated as suffering, its meaning is broader. It covers physical and psychological pain, the suffering caused by change such as aging, illness and death, and a subtler, persistent restlessness that remains even when desires and goals are fulfilled. While the Buddha understood that true change comes from within, many wanderers tragically spend their lives trying to fill their inner void through external means. Jung writes, "I early arrived at the insight that when no answer comes from within to the problems of life, they ultimately mean very little. Outward circumstances are no substitute for inner experience. After a long period of aimless wandering, one may finally commit to the inner journey, and the archetype of the seeker becomes awakened, beginning the search for one's soul. My soul, where are you? Do you hear me? I speak, I call you. I have returned, I am here again. I have shaken the dust of all the lands from my feet, and I have come to you. After long years of long wandering, I have come to you again. The one thing I have learned is that one must live this life. Give me your hand, my almost forgotten soul. How warm the joy at seeing you again. Life has led me back to you. Let us thank the life I have lived for all the happy and all the sad hours. My soul, my journey should continue with you. I will wander with you and ascend to my solitude. I am weary, my soul. My wandering has lasted too long, my search for myself outside of myself. Like a tired wanderer who had sought nothing in the world apart from her, shall I come closer to my soul. I shall learn that my soul finally lies behind everything, and if I cross the world, I am ultimately doing this to find my soul." Jung stated that he had to accept that what he previously called his soul was not at all his soul but a dead system. Therefore, he had to speak to his soul as something that did not exist through him but through whom he existed. The focus of life shifts from external achievements and aimless wandering to the pursuit of self-realization and theosis, union with God. In the Grail myths, the seeker appears as the knight in search of the Holy Grail, a symbol of the self or total personality. Many embark on the quest, but only the pure and pious succeed in finding it. The wanderer wanders for the sake of it, while the seeker roams with purpose, guided by a goal. The wanderer may only reflect on his inner life, whereas the seeker actively does inner work. The wanderer carries an inner void. The seeker builds upon an inner foundation. Throughout life, we move between being a wanderer and a seeker, two recurring patterns that emerge at different moments. The soul's journey is not static. It is not something that can be completed once and resolve all difficulties. The greatest problems of life can never be solved, only outgrown. The journey unfolds through one's daily duties, and there is meaning in every journey that is unknown to us. Suffering is unavoidable, but one can suffer meaningfully or not. Neurosis arises when we flee from the meaningful suffering that comes from knowing oneself. A neurosis is an offended God, or as James Hillman writes, our pathologies are calls from the gods. In other words, when we repress a part of ourselves that seeks expression in the world or prevent nature from fulfilling her role through us, we are in a sense offending the gods. The wanderer suffers neurotically, escaping from himself, while the seeker suffers authentically, confronting himself. Few burdens are heavier than blind suffering. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. The vast majority of problems arise from within. What we deny in ourselves is unconsciously projected onto others. We are always projecting both our good and bad qualities, so that the world appears filled with the fragmented parts of our personality. Some people seem to carry our inner gold, and we become instantly consumed by them, as if the very meaning of our lives depended on them. Others become hooks for our shadow, triggering anger, fear, or disgust in us. It is essential to recognize these projections, withdraw them, and integrate them, for they are simply aspects of ourselves. Only then can we move towards wholeness. We should not depend on others for our self-worth, for the most important relationship we have is with ourselves. We must not ignore ourselves, but learn to value, forgive, and love ourselves just as we do others. The seeker listens to his conscience, the inner voice that expresses the soul's intent. The ancient Greeks called this guiding force the daemon, which remembers what is in one's image, belongs to one's pattern, and carries the essence of one's destiny. A moral and a force of nature, the daemon guides our actions in ways we may not fully understand. Even when others advise us against a path, we feel an inner conviction that it is the right one to take, something we cannot fully explain to ourselves, let alone to others. Like the author of Ecclesiastes, the seeker realizes that power, fame, wealth, and pleasure are nothing more than a chasing after the wind. All these things vanish, leaving no lasting mark. Only the fruits of our work, acts of love, wisdom, and service endure. As Christ said, "By their fruits you shall know them." The fruit serves as a symbol of the completion of the individuation process, the ultimate goal and fulfillment of one's soul essence. Consciously lived suffering seems to have a redeeming effect on the past and on the future of humanity's collective consciousness. Jung writes, "The problem of crucifixion is the beginning of individuation. There is the secret meaning of the Christian symbolism, a path of blood and suffering, like any other step forward on the road of the evolution of human consciousness. As seekers, we may come to understand the meaning and purpose of our lives, yet this does not come without restlessness. It is the spiritual journey of the pilgrim, the cross we must carry on our individual journey towards consciousness, walking the path of the eternally alone. But as Jung wrote in a letter, no matter how isolated you are and how lonely you feel, if you do your work truly and conscientiously, unknown friends will come and seek you. Every step forward along the path of individuation is achieved only at the cost of suffering. Individuation is a heroic and often tragic task, the most difficult of all. It involves the suffering of the ego. The ordinary person we once were becomes burdened with the fate of losing himself in a greater dimension and being robbed of his sense of free will. He suffers from the violence done to him by the self. For Jung, the self is a God image, or at least cannot be distinguished from one. The early Christian spirit was not unaware of this, as Clement of Alexandria writes. Therefore, it is the greatest of all disciplines to know oneself, for when a man knows himself, he knows God. The seeker suffers from acedia, a word meaning without care in Latin. It is often translated as sloth, but it is more than mere laziness. Early Christian monks described it as a state of spiritual restlessness. Evagrius Ponticus, a desert father, named acedia one of the 8 tempting thoughts and called it the noonday demon because it strikes during the day's hottest and most exhausting hours, when body and soul are most vulnerable to weariness. It is as if the demon causes the sun to slow down so that the day seems endless. It distracts the monk, tempting him to pace his cell, gaze out the window, and look for the other brothers. It fills him with resentment towards his surroundings and the life he has chosen, while making him long for easier places. It shows him visions of a long life and the many hardships of the ascetic path, testing his spiritual discipline. The demon employs every possible means to make the monk abandon the ascetic life. Evagrius considers this the greatest trial in the monk's daily spiritual struggle. No other demon comes after this one. Once endured, the soul has faced its most intense temptation, and one enters a state of peace and unspeakable joy. One who is constantly seeking meaning may paradoxically fail to find it. The shadow seeker manifests as an obsessive need for spiritual growth and perfection, sacrificing instinct to ideals, health to work, and the earthly to the lofty. Such self-destructive behavior often results in physical and psychological illness, cutting life short and preventing the very goals one hoped to achieve. Who sits in utter idleness / shall come much sooner to the goal / than he who runneth after God / with sweat of body and of soul. This captures the paradox of mystical experience. Spiritual progress is not achieved through frantic effort, but through inner stillness and surrender. An obsession with achieving spiritual goals causes the ego to get in the way of grace. Like watering a plant, growth must happen naturally. It cannot be forced. The Shadow Seeker's excessive ambition makes him resemble Lucifer, who attempted to take God's throne and was cast down into hell, or Icarus, who ignored his father's warning not to fly too close to the sun and plunged to his death. Both myths stand as warnings against pride. The Shadow Seeker worships the idea of God rather than cultivating a real relationship with God. Religion becomes a label or cultural identity rather than a lived personal commitment. One prays mechanically without conviction, gives charity to be applauded, wears sacred objects for show, and treats these outward acts and appearances as the truth itself. When the representations of religion replace the reality of faith, it creates what Baudrillard calls hyperreality. Outward behavior is treated as the essence of faith, even though the underlying relationship with the divine is absent. The Shadow Seeker engages with a mere copy of religion, yet believes it to be true. We often search far and wide for treasure, unaware that it lies at home within ourselves. This is a common motif worldwide. A man dreams of treasure in a distant place. He travels there but finds nothing. He tells another man about his dream. The second man realizes that the treasure is actually at the first man's home. The first man returns and finds it buried in a familiar spot. As the alchemist stated in Sterculinis Invenitur, in filth it will be found. What you need most is often found where you least want to look. We resist confronting the despised or terrifying aspects of ourselves. When we neglect or run away from the filth in ourselves, the unconscious responds with nightmares, grotesque visions, or unknown figures chasing us. These visions, however, are nothing more than fragments of our own psyche, carrying urgent messages we desperately need. Until we acknowledge them, we remain in misery, no matter how convincingly we pretend that all is well. Jung writes, "We know that the mask of the unconscious is not rigid. It reflects the face we turn towards it. Hostility lends it a threatening aspect, friendliness softens its features. The monster you fear becomes the savior you need." The archetype of the savior typically comes from the place where we least expect and is frequently despised and rejected by others. It is precisely what we repress that assumes the role of the savior. This is the principle of psychic compensation. The repressed aspect carries the most energy and therefore the greatest potential for growth. When the ego is exhausted and one's convictions are depleted, the psyche naturally overturns. Then up comes the other side, which is full of life, that which one has never seen, accepted, or lived, fresh and green as spring. But that is precisely what makes it terrifying and also attractive, since it means a complete reversal of the whole personality. Some seekers choose to dedicate themselves entirely to their inner journey, becoming yogis, hermits, or ascetics, to avoid the distractions of the world that hinder the growth of the soul. However, if taken to an extreme, it becomes overly one-sided and reflects another aspect of the Shadow Seeker. For Jung, individuation and individualism are mutually exclusive. To isolate oneself on a mountain and meditate alone is to be visited only by one's own ghosts, and that is not individuation. The self does not arise in isolation but in relationship. It manifests through our deeds, each of which forms a bridge between ourselves and the world. The self is therefore fundamentally about connection. It comes into being through our relationships with others and with life itself. Jung writes, "One cannot individuate without being with other human beings. One cannot individuate on top of Mount Everest or in a cave somewhere where one doesn't see people for 70 years. One only can individuate with or against something or somebody. Individuation is only possible with people, through people. You must realize that you are a link in a chain, that you are not an electron suspended somewhere in space or aimlessly drifting through the cosmos." In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, after spending 10 years alone in the mountains, Zarathustra grows weary of his wisdom. Wisdom becomes a burden if it is not shared. Thus, like the evening sun that descends to give light to the underworld, Zarathustra begins his descent into mankind. The patron saint of Switzerland, Nicholas of Flue, also known as Brother Klaus, lived with his wife for 20 years, and together they raised 10 children. At the age of 50, he was seized by periods of inner restlessness and depression. In one vision, he saw 4 bright lights descending from heaven, revealing the place where a hut and a chapel should be built, and it was carried out according to his vision. His wife and children gave their consent for him to withdraw in this way, and they remained at peace with the decision, often visiting him at his hermitage. Brother Klaus never moved back with them. From that point on, he undertook a regimen of total fasting, sustained solely by the Eucharist, which he maintained until his death, lasting 20 years. Despite his isolation, Brother Klaus remained connected to the world. Visitors described him as in good physical condition, affable and content. On the brink of civil war, a pastor hurried to the well-respected hermit for help. Bound by his vow never to leave his cell, he entrusted the pastor with a message for the delegates, effectively averting the conflict. The contents of that message remain a mystery. The shamanic calling often follows a spiritual crisis, marked by visions, dreams, or trance, and a need for solitude. This illness signals that one has been chosen for a sacred role. By descending into the underworld and overcoming trials, the initiate undergoes a symbolic death and rebirth, gains wisdom, and ascends to the sky realm, becoming one who has awakened. The real work, however, begins in the return from paradise to society, for the shaman's mission is to serve and protect his people. In Buddhism, monks withdraw from society to live an ascetic and contemplative life, yet they remain connected to the lay community. By receiving food from the laity, monks practice humility, while in return offering blessings, guidance, and wisdom. This relationship is regarded as a sacred duty. The hero's journey mirrors these patterns. It begins with a call to adventure, leaving the ordinary world behind. Separation brings anxiety. In the special world, the hero faces the dragon, a symbol of one's deepest fears. By defeating the dragon, the hero experiences a symbolic death and rebirth, gaining insight and life experience. The journey continues with a return home, facing further trials, and bringing back the elixir, wisdom, love, or knowledge to share with others. Eventually, another call to adventure comes, and the cycle begins again. This movement from the ordinary world of consciousness to the special world of the unconscious and back again expresses an ancient truth. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of one only thing. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and descends again to the earth and receives the power of the above and below. Thus you will have the glory of the whole world. Therefore all darkness will flee from you. To ascend from earth to heaven alone is to remain too lofty, too one-sided. True wholeness requires a return to earth to fulfill one's duties and share one's insights with fellow suffering beings. Like Kierkegaard's Knight of Faith, such a person participates fully in worldly affairs, yet at every step makes the invisible movement of infinity, appreciating the beauty of existence and the simple joys of life. Mystics across the world seek theosis, a return back to our true home after our temporary exile in this world. They recognize that despite the apparent differences of our physical forms, we are fundamentally one. To harm another is ultimately to harm ourselves. Hence the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, a principle found in nearly all the world's religions. The longing for theosis makes the seeker feel consumed by a fire that does not burn, captive in a prison from which there seems no escape, yearning for God and yet unable to find him. Saint Teresa of Avila writes, "I live without living in me, and so great a life I hope for, that I die because I do not die. I now live outside myself after dying of love, because I live in the Lord who chose me for himself. When I gave him my heart, he put this sign on me, that I die because I do not die. Ah, how long this life is! How harsh this exile, this prison, and these chains in which the soul is enclosed. Only waiting for the release causes me such fierce pain that I die because I do not die. Come to an end, life, do not be a burden to me, for by dying, what remains but to live and delight in myself? Do not cease to console me, death, for so I ask you, for I die because I do not die. Like King Solomon, the seeker knows that with much wisdom comes much sorrow. Yet the seeker sometimes experiences a joy so profound that it surpasses anything the world has to offer. The greatest pain is often accompanied by the greatest bliss. In the Enneads, the Neoplatonist Plotinus reflects on his experiences of mystical union with the One, expressing astonishment at having to return to his human body and everyday reality after such transcendent experiences. The physical world appears heavy, harsh, and limiting, while the spiritual world is light, gentle, and boundless. The difficulty lies in uniting these opposites in harmony. This is the great work. How then can these two opposites be reconciled? We might find a hint of this when Lord Jesus, fully God and fully man, suffers in the Garden of Gethsemane, falling to the ground and sweating drops of blood in anticipation of what awaits him. He prays, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." These words mark one of the most profound moments in Christianity, the struggle to unite human suffering with the divine will. This tension reaches its climax on the cross, expressed in one of Christ's final words, the opening line of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The seeker is willing to sacrifice the most valued relationships and accomplishments in order to surrender to the divine will, shifting the center of life from ego or others to God, who alone satisfies all insatiable desire and in whom the weary and burdened heart may find rest. The most powerful prayer, one well nigh all-powerful to gain all things, and the noblest work of all, is that which proceeds from a quiet mind. The more quiet it is, the more powerful, worthy, useful, praiseworthy, and perfect the prayer and the work. To the quiet mind, all things are possible. What is a quiet mind? A quiet mind is one which nothing weighs on, nothing worries, which, free from ties and from all self-seeking, is wholly merged into the will of God and dead to its own.